Good day, everyone. Depending on what time zone you're in, good morning, good afternoon. My name is Nate Russell. I'm the senior judge for today, and I will ask the other judges to introduce themselves. Let's start with Marcia.
Hi, good morning, all. My name is Marcia Carter. Nate, do you want to know who I'm affiliated with or just the name?
Yeah, you know what? I think just the judges. We can say who we're affiliated with. I am Associate Director for Raytheon Technologies, a defense aerospace company.
Okay, Marcia Carter. I'm Senior Administrative Coordinator with the College of Business at Loyola Marymount University.
Thank you. Ralph?
Hi, everybody. I'm Ralph. I've been a CPA and also an institutional investor, equity analyst, and portfolio manager for most of my career. Excited to be here today.
Awesome. Thanks. I will ask the team just to introduce yourselves, no affiliations, just round the horn real quick.
Hi, my name is Camille.
My name is Ben Eastman.
I'm Michael Dramatosi.
I'm Richard Mandaro.
I'm Brian San Giorgio.
Awesome. Awesome. So let's start this off. I'm going to read a script to you guys, and then we'll get ready. In this part of the competition, you're taking on a fictional business identity and assigning a fictional business identity to the judges. Please make sure everyone knows who you are and who they are before you begin. You'll have 25 minutes to describe the legal, financial, and ethical dimensions of the problem and to recommend a solution that passes muster on all three counts. During this time, teams will be uninterrupted. When you are finished, the judges will ask you questions for 10 to 15 minutes. During the Q&A, both you and the judges will stay in character. After the Q&A, the judges will give you feedback outside the role playing. So give me a couple of seconds. I just want to start my timer. I'm going to set it for 25 minutes. And then we will start. So team, you give me the signal when you're ready, and then I'll start it. You guys good? All right. 3, 2, 1, begin.
Hello, Executive Board of the Wonderful Company. We thank you for inviting our team at Soil Stewards Consulting to analyze your company's current agricultural practices. Approximately 78% of global per capita calorie consumption originates from crops grown directly in soil. Sustaining the viability of soil and farmlands is not only key for your company's growth and revenue, it is also crucial in protecting access to nutritious diets for generations to come. Here at Soil Stewards Consulting, we are honored to present you, the Wonderful Company, with an action plan to modify your current farming techniques. This plan will help your company protect the health of workers, communities, and long-term viability of your preeminent asset, soil. Before we begin, allow us to introduce ourselves. My name is Camille Weber, and I'm the Environmental Analyst here at Soil Stewards Consulting.
My name is Brian San Giorgio, and I'm the Regulatory Analyst.
My name is Ben Eastman, and I'm one of the financial analysts.
My name is Michael Dramatosi, and I'm also one of our financial analysts.
And my name is Richard Mandaro, and I'm the health analyst.
Today, we will be walking you through an introduction of current agricultural practices we have identified at your company. We will introduce proposed modified practices, then explain the reasoning behind these proposed changes through ethical, legal, and financial viewpoints. Lastly, we will provide you, as executives at the Wonderful Company, with an action plan to implement our proposal.
Wonderful Company is a major player in the food and beverage industry, known for brands like Palm Wonderful and Halo mandarins. With over 200,000 acres of farmland, it's also one of the largest landowners in all of California. While the company promotes itself as a responsible grower, There's an opportunity to strengthen that commitment by adopting more sustainable and health-conscious agricultural practices. Our project explores a regenerative approach that supports both environmental resilience and long-term business value, while also aligning with Sustainable Development Goal number 3, good health and well-being, by promoting healthier ecosystems and safer working conditions for agricultural communities. Although the wonderful company brands itself as a responsible grower, its current agricultural practices tell a slightly different story. The heavy use of synthetic fertilizers and herbicides is not only harmful to the environment, but it's also unsustainable over the long term, degrading soil, polluting water, and exposing communities and workers to serious health risks. At the same time, there's a growing market opportunity. Consumers are increasingly seeking organic and ethically grown produce, and regulatory pressure is mounting on conventional farming methods. This creates a clear path forward. Rethinking current operations through regenerative agriculture to meet both ethical standards and emerging market demands. Making the shift would not only afford the wonderful company the leverage they need to raise their prices, but also would provide an opportunity to differentiate from their major competitors, who have at best made shallow promises to make the switch to regenerative practices. Our solution is a shift toward regenerative agriculture powered by natural inputs. Instead of relying on synthetic fertilizers and herbicides, we propose implementing a closed-loop system that uses compost and organic matter to restore soil health, reduce runoff, and build long-term ecological resilience. This approach not only cuts chemical dependency, but also boosts biodiversity, improves water retention, and supports long-term agricultural productivity. By embracing these regenerative practices, the wonderful company can better align with its health-conscious branding, meet rising consumer demand for organic produce, and reduce financial and legal risks tied to current practices. It's not just a more sustainable option, it's a smarter investment for the future.
Like Mike mentioned, your company owns and operates over 200,000 acres of land, so the decisions you make impact a wide range of stakeholders. First, consumers. Your company has a responsibility to ensure its products live up to their promise of being safe and healthy, and the company should foster consumer trust. Next, workers. It is your company's duty to prioritize workers' health, establish safety through non-toxic farming practices, and make sure that you're centering around the local communities. Along with local communities, your company must aim to mitigate environmental harm, protect local ecosystems, and enhance public health. Broader environment. As a major agricultural supplier, your company must work towards long-term sustainability, reducing ecological footprints and contributing to a healthier future. Finally, shareholders and investors. Investment in ethical practices that prioritize both profit and societal well-being is important for preserving your brand's reputation and long-term growth. Our solution aims to create a more sustainable practice to protect the interest of all key stakeholders. Your company has already made efforts to protect the environment and the health of workers and communities, and our team at Soil Stewards Consulting is honored to help further your work with an emphasis on soil health through substituting synthetic agrochemicals. Since naming sustainable agriculture as a key pillar of your strategy, the wonderful company has implemented several practices to improve farming methods. You implemented cutting-edge insecticide technology to reduce traditional chemical insecticides. You made progress towards your 2025 renewable energy goals, and you were even recognized for your sustainability actions by the nonprofit organization, the Climate Collaborative. Our team at Soil Stewards Consulting identified two main areas of improvement for your company to work on its sustainability commitments. First, fertilizer. Our team identified an overuse of ammonium nitrate, a chemical fertilizer, at several of your company's sites. When more ammonium nitrate is applied to soil than can be absorbed by crops for fertilizing purposes, a process known as nitrogen loading occurs. Nitrogen loading is when excess nitrogen is picked up by water and carried off the farm as agricultural runoff, which poses risks to the environment and human health. The second area is herbicides. While your company has found more sustainable solutions to insects, it has yet to remove the use of chemical weed killers from its operations. In the year 2021, 56,000 pounds of paraquat were applied to the wonderful company's farms and orchards. Paraquat can be harmful to both people and the planet. While these issues may seem daunting, our team is excited to work with the wonderful company to tackle your use of synthetic agrochemicals and position your company as a leader in regenerative agriculture for the good of people, the planet, and your company's long-term profits. As Soil Stewards Consulting's environmental analyst, I'd like to first illustrate the impact of these practices on the environment to give you some context on why these issues matter. Paraquat is a synthetic herbicide or weed killer used by your company. The chemical works by disrupting photosynthesis. However, it is non-selective, meaning it has the ability to affect all plants, whether they are weeds or crops. Further, paraquat can persist for over 20 years in soil, meaning it can accumulate and potentially cause long-term exposure and contamination. This can damage soil health and viability, resulting in lower crop yields and increased costs over time. Paraquat can also drift through the air or linger in dust, posing a risk to birds and mammals who are exposed. Finally, paraquat runoff can enter streams and groundwater stores, threatening both aquatic life and human health through drinking water contamination. Similarly, overuse of ammonium nitrate can be detrimental to the environment. As previously mentioned, this process is known as nitrogen loading, which you can see in the diagram, and it occurs when excess nitrogen enters waterways. Nitrogen loading is dangerous as too much nitrogen in waterways causes algae to grow faster than ecosystems can handle. This can harm water quality, food resources and habitats, and decrease the oxygen that fish and other aquatic life need to survive. Nitrogen can also penetrate into groundwater, which is often used for drinking water, and therefore threatens human health. Currently, Wonderful's farming methods overutilize ammonium nitrate, resulting in over 300,000 pounds of nitrogen loading from just one 1,500-acre site annually. Both nitrogen loading and paraquat runoff pose concerns to several waterways surrounding Wonderful's orchards. One of Wonderful's central orchards for citrus, pomegranates, and pistachios is surrounded by two crucial waterways, the San Joaquin River and the Chowchilla Bypass. The San Joaquin River is the longest river in Central California and is vital to California's water supply, agriculture, and ecosystem. It serves as a major drainage channel for the San Joaquin River Basin, irrigating farmland, supporting a diverse delta ecosystem, and providing water to millions. This river connects with the Chowchilla Bypass, which is a crucial waterway for groundwater management and irrigation, as it facilitates water delivery and recharge efforts. Groundwater is a vital underground freshwater resource, crucial for human needs like drinking and irrigation. It is also critical to the environment, sustaining ecosystems and replenishing surface water. It also provides more than 40% of California's drinking water. Therefore, the issues of groundwater contamination through nitrogen loading and paraquat runoff pose significant environmental and human health risks. To expand on the ethics of these risks on human health, I'll pass it over to our health analyst, Richard.
Thank you, Camille. I now want to bring our focus today to the heart of the discussion, the people, because at its core, sustainability is about protecting the well-being of those who grow, harvest, and live near your crops. Your orchards stretch more than 200 square miles of California's Central Valley, with over 3,000 employees and their families living and working in these areas. Many of these individuals, especially the 1,500 plus seasonal workers, are directly exposed to two key agrochemicals, one being paraquat, which is a synthetic herbicide, and nitrate-heavy synthetic fertilizers. Paraquat has been strongly linked to Parkinson's disease, ALS, and cognitive decline. These aren't distant possibilities. They affect movement, memory, and quality of life, and can lead to death or long-term disability. For children near treated fields, exposure is linked to developmental delays, hormonal disruption, and reproductive harm like infertility and miscarriage. Synthetic fertilizers present a different but equally as serious risk. Their high nitrate content can seep into groundwater, increasing the risk of colorectal cancer and thyroid cancers, which contributes to blue baby syndrome in infants, which is a potentially fatal condition where babies cannot absorb enough oxygen properly. These are not isolated one-off risks. They represent exposure across your entire operation. And when the science is clear, the opportunity to mitigate these risks and align with your health-driven mission becomes even more compelling. The wonderful company has long positioned itself as a health-forward, environmentally responsible brand. You've emphasized sustainable agriculture and supporting communities. These are powerful commitments you make, and ones we believe you're more than capable of meeting. But right now, there is a gap between message and action. Nitrate runoff continues to pose environmental and health risks across thousands of acres, and paraquat remains in use, a chemically widely recognized for its severe health impacts. At the same time, there's no public-facing update on how you are reducing these risks, no roadmap, no transparency on progress. That lack of communication creates uncertainty. And in today's world, uncertainty quickly turns into doubt, not just among consumers, but also among ESG-focused investors, major retailers, and even your own employees. To be clear, this isn't about blame. This is about risk mitigation. There's currently no public timeline for reduction or phase out and no recent update on progress. That silence creates doubt, not just among consumers, but among ESG-focused investors, retailers, and even your workforce. But you have the opportunity here. Transparency builds trust, progress builds momentum, and when your actions match your mission, your brand becomes bulletproof, not just in the eyes of your customers, but across the entire stakeholder ecosystem.
So as Richard and Camille dive into some of the health and ethical concerns, it's now crucial to consider the legal landscape surrounding these issues to mitigate risks. So there are many agencies and acts that are relevant to today's discussion and represent a broader national perspective on how impactful paraquat usage is, and as well as nitrogen loading is, and how regulated it needs to be. These acts listed here are most crucial on a national level and are all tied to and pushed by the EPA, which classifies nitrogen loading as a major environmental threat and paraquat as a severely toxic substance. On the right, you can see a map that highlights all the nations where paraquat is banned. There are over 70 nations where it is banned, and as you can see, these nations include China, Switzerland, and the UK, which are significant because they are nations that produce it. So now on a state level, one of California's popular slogans is California Dream Big. It is known by all that the state is a leader in innovation, especially when it comes to tech and sustainability. But how can a state dream big and innovate when they are home to the nation's top user of paraquat? The state has Proposition 65, which requires companies to list any chemicals used that cause health effects. And failure to follow these guidelines can result in major fines of up to $2,500 per violation, as well as lawsuits from government and private entities. Now, on a corporate level, and now looking at your company, there are some implications along with the failure to warn and misrepresentation. As mentioned before, your company promotes itself as health conscious, which you can see an example of through one of your products, which says "Tree to Table." We grow, handpick, and whole press our California pomegranates, 4 in every bottle. While this may be true, the failure to acknowledge these harmful chemicals in the process could lead to lawsuits tied to the state and consumer protection law, specifically Silver Code 1750, which prohibits misleading statements about a product or a company's practices. And even on a more federal level, there can be lawsuits to the Federal Trade Commission that specifically regulates against the company's sustainability. Now, on a more personal level, focusing on the workers, failure to ensure health and safety workers can lead to many legal implications. Federal agencies such as OSHA ensures that there are safe and healthy working conditions, but it has been found that those in contact with paraquat are more than twice as likely to develop Parkinson's. And this has just recently come to light since major risks were actively concealed by its makers. Here's a photo of a lady sitting to the right. Her name is Charlene Tenbrick. She's a farmer from Winters, California, who suffers from Parkinson's. Ms. Tenbrick sprayed paraquat on her farm from 1993 to 2000, and despite what she thought was protective equipment, ended up developing Parkinson's. She has stated publicly that paraquat is absolutely unnecessary and should be banned. There is no reason that farmers should face health effects in order to feed our nation. And no company wants to be the face of a devastating story like this, not only because of the potential lawsuits, but because of the irreversible damage to their public image, consumer trust, and long-term brand equity. Now, finally, most recently, there's been a new legislation that seeks to ban the use of paraquat by January of 2026. And when your company alternates to using regenerative practices, it will have to abide by the USDA organic standards to claim organic certification and officially be labeled as sustainable. This is what's going to allow your company to position itself as a trusted brand and attract many environmentally conscious consumers. Now I'm going to pass it off to Mike and Ben, who will dive into the financials.
Let's take a moment to talk about the financial implications of the wonderful company's current practices. First, land and operational costs in California continue to rise, meaning every inefficiency, especially ones associated with synthetic inputs, becomes more expensive over time. Second, there's growing pressure from consumers and shareholders who are demanding cleaner, more sustainable food production, especially people from younger population segments. That puts a price on reputation, especially when health-conscious branding clashes with toxic practices like Paraguay use. Third, these synthetic inputs come with long-term costs, declining soil health, groundwater contamination, and increased reliance on chemicals, each of which creates financial liabilities, whether through fines, lost yield, or lost trust. On the flip side, regenerative practices, though requiring an upfront investment, offer significant pricing power through premium organic products, long-term savings from improved soil productivity, and insulation from future regulatory risk. In short, the current path is costly and unstable. Regenerative agriculture is not only a sustainable option, but a financially strategic one as well.
Okay, so hopefully by this point, my team members have convinced you all of the importance of switching to our proposed farming methods, but I'm sure you're concerned with the financial feasibility of this project. Here we can see synthetic fertilizers cost $1,420 per acre, while compost costs $1,680. The $260 difference comes from higher variable costs, primarily labor and application frequency. At first glance, the cost appears to be more expensive than synthetic fertilizers, but as we'll see, this is only part of the story, and a misleading one at that. Critically, these numbers ignore two types of hidden costs: environmental damage and yield loss. Synthetic fertilizers degrade soil health over time, reducing long-term productivity. Compost rebuilds it. Next, we'll show how these hidden costs change the financial narrative. Let's begin with soil health. Synthetic fertilizers degrade organic matter in the soil, which reduces its natural fertility and resilience. Over time, this means we'll need to apply more inputs just to maintain current yields, which we estimate will cost $75 per acre. Next, groundwater contamination is a serious concern. Nitrate runoff from synthetic fertilizers not only pollutes nearby water sources, but it also exposes us to potential regulatory fines and costly water treatment expenses at around $45 per acre. Biodiversity and pollinator loss is another often overlooked consequence. These chemicals harm beneficial organisms like pollinators and predatory insects that naturally manage pests. Their loss can drive up pest control costs by around $60 per acre. Additionally, synthetic fertilizers are a major source of nitrous oxide emissions, a potent greenhouse gas. This adds a carbon and climate risk, especially if future legislation imposes a carbon tax or compliance fees. We estimate this to be a cost of $35 per acre. Finally, in the long-term yield decline, continuous use compacts soil and reduces its biological activity, leading to falling productivity. This could cost the wonderful company around $120 per acre in lost output capacity. So in conclusion, while synthetic fertilizers may appear more cost-effective up front, these compounding hidden costs paint a different picture. Transitioning to compost can help us preserve soil health, reduce exposure to environmental regulations, and ultimately protect our profitability in the long term. Here, we compare all the cost per acre of synthetic fertilizers versus compost. In the top left, you can see the fixed costs, which remain the same for both synthetic and compost, which are made up of land, irrigation, labor, and equipment, totaling out to $1,250 per acre. In the bottom left, you can see the variable costs which change between synthetic and compost. As explained earlier, where compost requires more attention to the fertilizer and application, which costs more. But the key difference lies in the indirect cost of synthetics, which totals out to be $335 per acre from soil degradation, water contamination, biodiversity loss, emissions, and long-term yield. Next, we'll take a look at what these two methods actually cost the wonderful company. Here, when you total up all the costs over the 200,000 acres, you find synthetics actually cost more money per acre at $351 million compared to $336 million for compost. So while the compost has a higher upfront cost, when you include the indirect costs shown in orange, it ends up being more cost-effective and sustainable in the long run. Now we'll send it back to Richard, who will summarize our findings and discuss how these changes could be implemented effectively.
Thanks, Ben. So now you may be asking, how does this affect your business? Ethically, there's a responsibility to protect the health of your workers and the surrounding community. Living up to your brand promise doesn't just inspire loyalty, it drives long-term brand strength. Legally, the landscape is shifting. California's Proposition 65 mandates warnings for chemicals like paraquat and nitrate-heavy fertilizers. Assembly Bill 1963 aims to ban paraquat by 2026. At the same time, agencies like the OSHA and the FTC are increasing scrutiny on workplace safety and misleading sustainability claims. Financially, while synthetic agrochemicals may appear cheaper upfront, the hidden costs stack up. From soil degradation and nitrate mitigation fines to health liabilities and yield decline, these aren't theoretical. They are real expenses that erode profit margins. The good news is that the solution, regenerative agriculture, addresses all of these risks. It's not just ethical, it's smart business. Now let's talk about what this actually looks like. We are recommending a 4-phase transition to regenerative agriculture, a practical, step-by-step approach that removes the need for both paraquat and synthetic fertilizers while protecting your people, the land, and your long-term profitability. Phase 1, months 1 through 3, you map out and how these chemicals are currently used. Then begin identifying organic and mechanical alternatives that already meet compliance standards. Phase 2, months 4 through 9, you'd pilot test those alternatives. Start with crops like pomegranates, which are more resilient. Try composting, cover cropping, and other regenerative methods on a manageable scale. Phase 3, months 10 through 18, gather results. What worked? Where did yields improve? Measure soil health, labor efficiency, and cost, and use that to build out a rollout plan that's realistic and customized to your operation. And phase 4, months 19 through 24, expand what works already, scale those regenerative practices across your acreage, and begin exploring certifications like regenerative organic, a third-party seal that reinforces your position as a clean and ethical brand. This isn't about changing everything overnight. It's about taking the right steps at the right time with the right intention. You already have a mission grounded up in wellness and community. Regenerative agriculture brings that mission to life from the soil up. And when your crops grow clean and your conscience is clear, it's not just good farming, it's leadership right here. Thank you. We're happy to take your questions.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I appreciate the information, and I'll kick off the first question. You mentioned that this is really about risk mitigation. I didn't see that we are breaking any laws per se. We are still within the law of what we're doing. And so I wanted to just make sure that this is an ethical or legal problem. And then the second part of my question is, are we sure that the compost solution doesn't have any environmental impacts at all either? Can someone address that for me?
Yeah, so I could definitely touch on the first part that you asked. I know that you said the company isn't breaking any laws, but the thing is that your brand has emphasized sustainable agriculture and supporting communities. So I think the message that you are bringing is more important, and I think that using that instead of in a sense of trying to greenwash or try to show that you are using methods that are not geared towards what people actually think are healthy or supporting communities. I think shifting towards the composting will bring, a greater good to your company as a whole and build greater transparency. I also think that a lot of the younger generation nowadays, as your target consumer, they are very health conscious about what goes into their products. And I believe that if they find, and they dig and find that these chemicals are still being used, they may be deterred and go to other brands that are looking for a better and healthier alternative from these chemicals. And I'll bring it over to one of my teammates for the question about the regenerative agriculture with the composting.
Sure. So as far as the environmental impacts of composting, it's all positive. No such damage whatsoever. There is no nitrate runoff. There is no nitrogen loading. There is no harm to human health whatsoever. So we see that as a real opportunity to not only, like we mentioned, mitigate risk, but also, you know, pave the way and, you know, position yourself as a front runner in the uh, transition to a healthier, more sustainable agricultural practice ecosystem.
So I'll turn it over to my colleagues to ask questions, Marcia or Ralph.
Sure, I guess I'll go next. Thank you all very much for the information. It's much appreciated. It's an issue we've been grappling with for a while. Do you have any case studies of either US or European companies who have implemented the suggestions that you're presenting here at scale? And if so, what have the financial results look like in those case studies? Thank you.
So as far as larger companies that have fully scaled it, we were not able to find any such case studies, but I will mention that some larger companies such as PepsiCo, Mars, and Nestle have made commitments to making that switch to regenerative practices. But as we mentioned during our presentation, these companies have only made shallow promises thus far. They have very lofty targets set at, 100% conversion by 2030, but the highest range we've seen is somewhere in 5 to 10% conversion thus far.
Does that concern you at all that if we take this big leap, where obviously we don't have the scale of a PepsiCo or Nestle, are you concerned that uh, somewhere in your projections there, I don't know, might be some over-optimistic projections that lead to really adverse financial consequences for the wonderful company?
Not at all. To me, as we mentioned before, the younger population segments are increasingly concerned with not only their own health, but also the health of the environment and the ecosystems that we rely on for our food sources. So I think, as we mentioned, this is going to take an upfront cost, but in the long term, it will pay dividends for years to come. And frankly, if the company was to not make this switch, they're they're opening themselves to the possibility of losing a significant share of the market as, these other companies such as PepsiCo, such as Mars, such as Nestle, that control such a large share of the market switch themselves.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, I'd like to go next.
Yep.
I'd like to piggyback off of what Ralph was asking. I have a few questions about this. Have you thought about partnering with other countries? Because I know I'm a Dutch citizen, and in Holland, there is greenhouse. Um, there are a lot of greenhouse grown, natural, sustainable um, farms there. And also, how about partnering with now in place organic fertilizer companies? I'm a backyard farmer. I do my own in the back. I'm just curious, have you checked it out that? And also the timeline. I have a question about that timeline. That timeline seems to be pretty slim in real time actualization of what could be, what could happen.
So as for the partnership part, we
Mhm.
definitely would recommend partnering with, like you mentioned, existing producers of those more natural inputs, anything from commercial composters to local farmers that might have an excess of compost or natural inputs. And I'm going to pass it over to Richard to speak on the timeline aspect.
Yeah, so I definitely think your question about the action plan and the timeline, I definitely agree that it is a bit short and concise. I believe that we think that we could work with you to figure out a plan that is, very step-by-step specific for what your needs are and how long your company needs. This timeline was to give you a base of what it could look like and a possible action plan moving forward if you did want to take those steps more quickly. But we are willing to work, if it's, needs to be a bit longer or more tailored more towards your needs. We were just willing to see what you had to say and then work with you going from there. But we wanted to give you a general kind of statement of what you can expect for the foreseeable future.
Okay, and would you be willing to work with us as into changing the mindset of the general population to more sustainable practices?
Absolutely. That is at the heart of what our consulting company is here for. We really do believe in taking companies and helping them find ways to make sustainability accessible for all employees, all farmers, all workers, whether that be through education or through just working to make our solutions possible. So we would love to be here with you guys every step of the way in that process.
And
Thank you
to,
so much.
and to add on to Camille, I just wanted to let you know, like I said, as we were presenting, this isn't about blame. Again, we think that your company has a wonderful opportunity to, enhance and, engage new and different customers. I think that we just want to make sure that you know about this opportunity and that you have this chance to, be transparent and give people a better and healthier product.
Appreciate your time. Thank you.
I just have one question, follow-up question with regard to comparison of the synthetic and the compost. And I was going to ask a question, but my colleague Marcia asked it about the timeline. But when you compare the cost, did you also include the cost of compost, the cost of actually making the transition? Is that included in your comparison at all? And are there any, same with Ralph, are there any comparisons to show us, cost comparisons to show what the actual cost of the implementation would be over the 24 months?
Yeah, so I can touch on that. So we did have it in the slides, the comparison of them. So there was these fixed costs that were this consistent across both methods, which include the general farming practices that you would expect. And then the variable cost, which is the difference between the two. The compost is more expensive to apply because it requires more frequency and more attention than synthetic fertilizers would. But I think as showed in the hidden costs, not all of them directly impact your company besides for the long-term yield loss, but they all have a net impact as far as like a net societal impact goes. In the end, when you total up, as you could see in the last financial slide, the compost did end up being cheaper in the long run, as you can see here.
And just to bounce off that really quick, uh, as Ben mentioned, some of these costs that are tied in here, especially the hidden ones, are more societal focused, but and they may not at the current moment be potential, specifically a current liability, I guess is the term I'd put on it. But as we're, living in a very quickly evolving legal landscape where people, especially the younger people that are, have those higher customer lifetime values, they're more concerned about the environment, their own health, and thus, we can expect to see at least over the course of our lifetimes at some point, an increasing scrutinization and increasing uh, legal ramifications for companies that don't make the switch. So in the long term, we do look at that as a financial liability.
Thanks. Any other final questions from my colleagues, Ralph or Marcia? No? Marcia, you have any final questions? You're on mute.
Of course I am. I'm just looking over my notes, and what I'm seeing is that in the long run, you know, we are tied to our shareholders and the population of our consumers who potentially will or will not be willing to pay more for organic produce. So I'm guessing that goes back to the sustainability, changing the mindset of pretty much our children at this point. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, just to touch on this, you know, at the same time as we think we can implement some sort of educational program, we think that's a sound idea to take up. We don't even necessarily think you need to go that far. This is a switch that's happening regardless naturally. As you mentioned, the younger population segments have already shown from study to study that they care a lot more about health. They care a lot more about the environment. So just simply based off of that, you can, you know, do the math. They're going to be willing to pay more for it uh, in the long term.
Okay, thank you.
And as for just to expand on that question a bit, your brand already, I know from the pistachios to the Palm Wonderful that comes in the bottle, you're already paying quite a premium price for those products. So expecting the shift to composting, I don't know if it would really change cost that much. It may just increase your profit margins, if anything. But the products that you have already are higher end products that, you know, you are already selling. So I just wanted to include that to maybe help make your decision.
Thank you.
May I just add one more question? So I've read a lot about glyphosate and the issues surrounding that. That's still legal as far as I know in Europe and most parts of the world. I've never heard of paraquat, but I guess they're substitutes for each other. I'm surprised that the wonderful company, given it sounds like paraquat is more toxic than glyphosate, why wouldn't they at least have already switched over to glyphosate?
Was that Ralph, was
That's
that for the team here or?
I can tackle that
That was
one.
just my
So
question. If anybody has an opinion, maybe it's not in the disclosures that you were able to find, but curious why, especially an organic, sustainable advertising company like ours looking to sell products at premium price points wouldn't immediately substitute a less toxic for the more toxic alternative.
I can tackle that one. I think, you know, you mentioned glyphosate as an alternative, but I would liken it to being just as bad. We've seen a lot of scrutiny around glyphosate, even in our country over the past few years. I'm sure if you take a few minutes, maybe 30 minutes to do some Google searches, you can find a load of different articles on this issue. So we don't even think that switching to glyphosate would be any better. Switching to any other synthetics would be any better. At the end of the day, it's really the same issue. And we need to get back to the natural systems that our Earth has, you know, blessed us with.
Thank you.
I'll add on to that really quickly that the research surrounding paraquat and its harms is pretty new. So it's possible that as the wonderful company, this impact just has not been switched yet. And that is why our company is here to provide you with this solution to really take a look at your farming practices and make sure that they align with your sustainability commitments.
Okay. I think that concludes all the questions. Ralph, Marcia, are you two good? Great? Marcia, you're off camera, but I'm gonna think that's a yes. So let's go ahead and break character for a sec. And let's judges provide feedback. So I'll open it up to Marcia or Ralph if you guys want to go first on feedback to the team, to the soil stewards.
Ralph, you want to go first?
Okay. I'll kick it off. I'll say that this is in my opinion, this was a pretty tough subject. I appreciate the education and the feedback. I think as trying to be unbiased, it's hard for me to make a decision financially on why this is worth making the jump. I didn't see any compelling evidence from you know, I understand the ethical and the moral part of it, but I didn't see a legal reason that we were so far out of compliance of what we're allowed to do legally in California. And I think that there was also a statement made that the wonderful company is also in a transition as well, preparing for some laws that are about to come into effect. So that's the other thing I didn't necessarily walk away with. I wasn't necessarily convinced on the costs to implement going from compost to synthetic. I see the two bars here. It would have been good for me. I know when I see this in my line of work, what makes up the different fixed costs and the variables, something being very specific on what's driving it. And also I'll say the implementation, the action plan over 24 months, the price tag to do that would have been nice. Is it, how much is it to actually, and so I could understand what that cost over time is for me to get my money back or that return. That would have been nice for me. But overall, I think it's a really, really good topic. Really, really well presented. I thought it was, it was educational for me in terms of the issues and stuff that were going on in this particular case. Marcia, Ralph?
Well, I'm excited and I'm absolutely down with what you're trying to do as a backyard farmer. Everything I use is organic. And I appreciate, that's why I was mentioning the timeline. It takes time to grow fruits and vegetables and to see the yield in your crops and all that. But I absolutely am excited that you have done this. I think it's a wonderful presentation. And my question for you, would you be actually presenting this to the wonderful company? Anybody?
I think what our idea was maybe not like, the wonderful company like the CEO or anything like that, but more like the board that sits on for sustainable agriculture or sustainable development or just sustainability in general. I don't think our goal was to reach that high of a level yet, but to get our foot into the door, kind of, that was at least how I think we were thinking, in the sense, not so high level, but definitely, pretty high.
I think you could.
Yeah,
Why
and
not?
I'll sit here, sorry, as like the visionary, I guess, of the group. I think this absolutely could go to the CEO. I hear uh your frustrations or the shortcomings that you mentioned as far as the finances go. And we definitely could have gotten a little bit more specific with those, but on a basic level, the younger segments, as you mentioned time and time again, are becoming demanding of this sort of practice and this switch. So we think it's a very strategic move and not just in an environmental sense, but even in a financial sense, will definitely pay dividends.
Rob, any
Well,
feedback?
yeah, I think you all did Great job. So it's a topic I'm very interested in. So Marcia, I'm an aspiring backyard farmer. And I think it's pretty hard, is what I've heard. And
It is
it's a
hard
labor of
work.
love.
It's hard work, yeah.
So I thought you did a great job articulating the ethical case. Maybe the one thing there I would have liked to have seen just some stats on, like, drop something in about, increasing colorectal cancers. And I don't know if there's any research that can specifically connect these synthetic farming practices to some of these ailments that you talk about, but like something there just to put a little meat on the bones. I thought the legal, I actually really liked it. So I spent a lot of my life thinking about tail risks that could happen. So just because it hasn't been a big legal issue for a wonderful company so far doesn't mean that, it couldn't be an asbestos kind of thing at some point in the future if the science really specifically gets to target the connection between wonderful companies' practices and some of these like physical ailments or like fertility issues. I mean, that's obviously a big societal problem. And then on the financial side, I'm a numbers guy, so I think if you had a chart in there showing about price premiums that other companies have been able to achieve from like truly sustainable practices, and then incorporating, if you could have found even maybe smaller, less scaled case studies that show, yeah, these economics actually do work. It's a short-term versus long-term debate at these companies, and the short-term optimization is probably to continue with the kind of synthetic practices that these companies have been doing. And maybe the long term is, that's your job really. The long term is to persuade them that these like all natural processes, sustainable agricultural techniques are an upgrade. And it does have to work for their bottom lines, I would guess. But even if it's a tie, if you can like unequivocally show it's a tie or better, I think you'll get more companies on board.
It's good stuff.
Yeah, seriously.
Absolutely. Mhm.
Thank you all.
I think that's all I have. Thank you so much for the education for me. I appreciate it, and all the best going forward.
So can I just say one last thing? As far as wonderful is concerned, you have to admit they've done a wonderful job of presenting their product to the general population. It's pretty, yeah. I would have a question about also, in keeping with sustainability, all of the plastics that they're using.